If you like rock and metal, you've likely come across Ghost at least once. And you've probably thought,
hey, those costumes are really cool. They remind me of a black metal band.
And a band like Mayhem may have popped into your mind. That's sort of what happened to me the other day, and what led to this video script idea. I was thinking about how many rock and metal bands have incorporated makeup into their image. Kiss, The Misfits, King Diamond, Alice Cooper, Behemoth, and many others. But I had a hard time answering who was the first one to do it. So I started researching, and I think I finally found the answer. If you had the same doubt as me, stick around, because today you'll find out. To find out who was the first artist or band to wear makeup as part of their image, we have to go back a few decades to the early 80s. In 1981, a new metal band from Denmark was founded, and right from the start, it was clear that the band was led by a very distinctive individual. The band was Mercyful Fate, and the frontman, King Diamond. His face was mostly covered in white makeup, and you could see a black upside-down cross right on his forehead. Mercyful Fate would later become one of the most iconic bands in the history of metal. But what were King Diamond's influences? How did he come up with the idea of wearing makeup? Was it from a popular rock band like Kiss? Well, not exactly. In fact, Gene Simmons once wanted to sue King Diamond over his makeup design. In an interview with Metal Hammer, King Diamond addressed this issue and explained, "There's a lot of reasons why this happened. They dropped their makeup around this time, but they still had the copyright on the look. I was never influenced by them. My influences were Peter Gabriel and Alice Cooper. I said, I don't have a lot of money that you can sue me for, but you have a lot of money that other people can sue you for." They were not the first to wear makeup. It never got to be a lawsuit, it just got stirred up. From this, we can deduce two things. One is that Kiss didn't influence King Diamond's decision to wear makeup, and the second is that Kiss did it first. After all, nobody would sue anyone if they didn't think they were the first to do something. And that's easy to prove when you learn that Kiss' debut album was released in 1974, while Mercyful Fate's debut album was released in 1983. And to be honest, by 1983, Kiss was already a powerhouse. They had released several successful albums, such as Love Gun, Destroyer, and Dynasty by then. So, with that in mind, we could say that Kiss was the first band to wear makeup, right? Well, that wouldn't be the case either. While Kiss is the band that can probably claim to wear the most recognized makeup,
I mean, is there anyone in the world who hasn't seen these designs at least once in their lives?
they weren't the first. This is when the research gets a bit complicated, because in the early 70s, the glam rock movement was emerging, and many musicians were starting to wear makeup. The most famous of these was David Bowie. In 1972, Bowie released the album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, introducing one of his many stage personas, Ziggy Stardust. Here we see makeup used as an artistic choice that complements the artist's image, creating a character that seems out of this world, a character that didn't come from Earth. And we're talking about 1972, before Kiss even played their first show. So would it be fair to say that David Bowie was the first rock musician to wear makeup in his performances? Well, once again, no. Remember when we talked about King Diamond and the issue with Gene Simmons? He also briefly mentioned his influences were Peter Gabriel and Alice Cooper. Peter Gabriel, like Bowie, used a lot of visuals in his shows in the early 70s, including various makeup designs and custom costumes. But let's focus on Alice Cooper, who didn't start his theatrical performances in the 70s, but as early as the late 60s. In fact, during a Rolling Stone interview, Alice Cooper recalled meeting David Bowie before he was famous. I remember him coming to one of our shows early on, before he was David Bowie. He was David Jones then, and he was a mime. He came to one of our shows when Alice was really notorious and banned in England. He probably had it in his mind already to be Ziggy Stardust. But this kind of opened that door because he saw what it could be. He created an entirely new character. So it's clear that Alice Cooper influenced musicians who started their careers, or at least began wearing makeup in the 70s. For example, Kiss. In an Ultimate Classic Rock interview, Cooper gave more insights, saying, "We'd known back in the day. We were not surprised about Kiss. We knew them before they were Kiss. We told them where to buy their makeup. People were going, "What do you think about this band that wears makeup?" And I said, "Yeah, I know who they are. They wear kabuki makeup, and it's not like mine, and they're not like us. They're their own thing." When we first started the whole theatrics thing, I was hoping it would break the door down and show that theatrical bands could make hit records. We did that. Then Kiss came along, and Bowie came, and everyone who wanted to be theatrical could be theatrical and still make hit records. That was one of the few things we did before anybody else. Now we can see the huge influence Alice Cooper had on several artists and bands who wanted to present their shows in a non-conventional way. He went on to sell tens of millions of albums worldwide and released several hits like School's Out, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and Poison, which will remain forever embedded in the history of rock. So finally, is it fair to say that Cooper was the first rock musician to wear makeup as an artistic choice? Again, the answer is no. More digging into Alice Cooper's influences reveals one that seems to have had the most impact on him: Arthur Brown. Born in England in 1942, 6 years before Cooper, Brown introduced some truly extravagant costumes and makeup designs to the rock scene that would be of huge importance to not just Alice Cooper, but many other musicians, like Bruce Dickinson and Elton John. The influence he had on Alice Cooper was so significant that Cooper even went as far to state, without Arthur Brown, there would be no Alice Cooper. Before concluding this video, I've got to mention Screamin Jay Hawkins. Although his music style leaned more towards blues and soul rather than rock, for those who don't know, he wrote and released the classic I Put a Spell on You in 1956, and his stage image was more about custom clothing and accessories rather than makeup, at least from the photos I could find online. He undoubtedly influenced many musicians who incorporated theatrical aspects into their performances in the following decades. Finally, it seems fair to say that in the rock scene, Arthur Brown is likely the first musician to wear makeup as an artistic choice, while in the metal scene, that throne would be occupied by King Diamond. If you remember at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I think I finally found the answer. Why is this important? Well, in cases like this, absolute certainty is never possible because there's always a chance that an unknown rock or metal band wore makeup even before Arthur Brown or King Diamond, but perhaps no footage exists, so that's something we always need to keep in mind. Now, I have a question for you. What other rock or metal musicians and bands can you recall wearing makeup that I didn't mention? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.